Okay, so this is a commentary by Ohr HaChaim, where he discusses the idea in the pasuk that talks about the daughter of a Kohen that um, goes through different situations and how and when she can lose her privilege to eat truma and things that the family members of the Kohen are allowed to eat, right? So just to quickly recoup the possible situations, he says that it's psukim 12 and 13 in the Chumash in this week's Parshat Emor, right? And it says that if Kohen's daughter shall be married to a non-Kohen, she may not eat from the holy things, and if the daughter of a Kohen will become a widow or divorcee, and not have offspring, then she may return to her father's house, and as she was in her youth, and then she may eat from it again. And he goes on to give a huge introduction into the idea that I'm gonna just super briefly recoup and basically talk about the idea of how the world is built. And that's why on my background you have like the four worlds, like you see the physical world at the bottom, and then the world of Yetzirah above, and world of Bria, the blue one, and then the one with a lot of light, the world of Atzilus. He says that the Hashem created this universe, radiated the whole universe out of his holy name, Yud Kei Vav Kei, right? Came the four worlds, and with these four worlds, also out of them emanates different parts of the soul of a Jewish person. And he talks about idea that the Jewish people is discussed in the Gemara, that the Jewish people are on a higher spiritual level than even the Malachim. Even though Malachim are purely spiritual beings, the Jewish person is such an amazing creature that he has something in his structure, like that comes from all the levels of creation up to the highest level of Atzilus. And on this picture, what I tried to depict is, you can see there's this light going from all the way bottom, from Earth, all the way up through the worlds and into the very top, right, to the world of Atzilus. And the idea, he says, is that Hashem created this miraculous structure that spiritually developed individual, a Jew that is spiritually accomplished, right, is a bridge that can connect the entire creation from the highest spiritual levels all the way down into the physical world. Now, once you have this structure in you, he says that it doesn't mean that everybody all at once has, all the levels of his soul, right? So there can be a person that only has a lowest level that's called Nefesh, and that is the level that is capable of interfacing with the physical body of a person and dealing with the physical world. Because by definition, he says that the spiritual and physical are further apart from each other than even water and fire, which are usually used as the examples of something opposite each other. He says that physical and spiritual are even more apart, diametrically opposed to each other than water and fire, right? Also, by the way, speaking of the four, he mentions that, right, in this world we say that everything is made out of four elements: the earth, water, air, and fire, right? So the four elements also come from this idea of reality being generated out of this four-lettered name of Hashem, right? So like the letter Yud generates the world of Atzilus, and the letter Hey, the first one, is the world of Bria, and then the letter Vav is the world of Yetzirah, and the second Hey is the world of Asiyah. And he brings the psukim and examples where it's all coming from the Tanakh. So I'm just super, condensing all of that introduction. We're just gonna assume that these are the concepts that we're relatively familiar with and had gone through on different shiurim and classes and have some idea, right? And then it goes into discussion of what happens to the soul when you develop, right? You have your Neshamah, and then if it develops enough, then your Ruach can come in and it can be inside your Neshamah, right? And so the Neshamah is going to be an interface between the Ruach, which is super holy, spiritually, much more advanced than Nefesh, right? And the Nefesh will be interface between that spiritual, very high level and your body, your goof, and the physical world. And then the next level is Neshamah, right? And it's even more holy. And so Ruach is an interface between the Neshamah and the Nefesh, because he says the difference between Neshamah and the Nefesh is gigantic, right? Because each next level is a huge leap. It's not gradual, right? It's not like first, second, third, and fourth floor. It's like geometrical proportion difference, right? And then the highest level from the world of Atzilus, that's called Chaya or Neshamah Neshamah, is the same concept, right? The regular Neshamah is the interface between the Chaya and the lower level of Ruach, and so on and so forth. So it's like a Russian doll where you have one inside another, inside another, inside another, and you can think of every level of the soul as a protective gear, right? That is needed for the more sophisticated level of the soul to be able to interface with rough surroundings that it can interface with directly. All right, and then it talks a lot about how you can spiritually grow, and then you can grow from level of Nefesh and then earn the level of Ruach, and if you do it great, then the Ruach can elevate the Nefesh to its own level, which would be impossible for Nefesh by its own accord. And same concept with Neshamah lifting up the Nefesh and Ruach to its level, and then the Chaya lifting the bottom three to its level. And that's in a positive direction. And then it talks about what possible effects can be on the levels of the soul if the person does something bad, right? So he says the Nefesh can be destroyed, right? It's possible to accomplish with negative actions even the destruction of the Nefesh. The Ruach is more intense, spiritually sophisticated, so you can like stain it, like if you were to put ketchup and whatever oil or whatever on my white shirt, it would not look nice anymore, right? And then he says the Neshamah, you can't even stain it. It's so spiritually up there that what you can do is you can reduce the light that it has, right? It can dim like a bulb, from 100% to 20% of its brightness, right? And that's the suffering of the Neshamah. And the Chaya, he says, is so holy that you can't even do anything to it. But what does happen is the moment there's a danger that you can affect negatively your highest level, that level of the soul will just leave human being and escape before you can do anything to it. But it will also be upset because it came with a purpose, and because it had to leave, it couldn't fulfill the purpose, right? So each level, proportionate to its sophistication, right, has its own ways of elevating or being degraded. So with all of that preamble, and like I said, this is like a super short version of a huge introduction that he has. He says there's a very important allusion in this whole portion that talks about the daughter of the Kohen and what can happen to her. He says, keeping all of that in mind, all of what I said, says that the pasuk says that no outsider is allowed to eat holy things, right? Meaning that if I am not a Kohen, I am not allowed to eat truma ever, period, right? There's no way it can be possibly allowed to me. And he says that on a simple level, right? It means like things that are dedicated to Kohen, that Hashem gave to Kohen, like let's say truma, and only Kohen, only Kohanim, and certain other people inside of their household are allowed to eat, and anybody else is not even allowed to eat it. So that's the simple, basic level of what it can mean. Also, he says the remez, the hint here is to what we call kodesh, is this special spiritual energy, bounty that Hashem provides to Bnei Israel, specifically, right, to Bnei Israel as opposed to all the other nations, right? So now let's forget about Kohen as a member, certain member of the Jewish tribe, descendant of Aaron a Kohen, right? We're talking now about the idea of the soul of a Jewish person, right? And the Jewish person, just like Kohen is allocated specific gifts that he only is allowed to partake, same way, there's certain spiritual light that Hashem exclusively dedicated to the Jewish soul. Whether you are Kohen, a Levi, or a lowly Israelite like myself, still you have exclusive access to Hashem's light that no other nation, not even Malachim, no one else in the universe has access to. Now, it says that there are different people that can be in the household of a Kohen. And they have different rights of whether they are allowed or not allowed to eat certain holy things. So, for example, he says that the pasuk says, "Toshav Kohen v'sahir," right? A Kohen can have, I don't know, somebody who is like a resident in his property, or he's a contractor, right? He hired someone to work on his field, and while the guy's working on his field, he probably, I don't know, also lives in his garage or something, right? So, and we say that who are these toshav and sahir in the context of the idea that we're talking about the whole thing is a Jewish soul, right? So, Kohen is the level of Neshamah. So who would be considered to be a resident or a hired worker who's a Neshamah, right? So he says this is a allusion to the lower levels of a human soul, to Ruach and Nefesh, right? So Ruach is the toshav of a Kohen, is the residence of the Kohen, because as I mentioned, as he does an introduction, in order for the Neshamah to come into this world, it can't interface directly with physical world. Can't even interface directly with the Nefesh. The only way the Neshamah can come into your body, into your person, is that there has to be already a level of Ruach. So Ruach for the Neshamah is like it's an apartment, right? The only way it can come into this world, it has to go into this apartment. Ruach is the residence of the Neshamah. And who is the hired worker? Hired worker is someone who actually does stuff, right? Like a contractor. That would be your Nefesh, because your Nefesh is what, by extension, interacts with the physical world, right? Because Neshamah comes into you and it says, I want to do a mitzvah. I want to put tefillin with insane kavana or something like this. Well, guess what? Neshamah cannot manipulate your body limbs. It cannot move your hands. It cannot do interface with your body directly. It has to have a protective layer around it, right? So it has Nefesh. But even Nefesh, like we said, is not able to interface directly with physical world, with your body. So Nefesh is surrounded by, Ruach. Ruach is surrounded by your Nefesh. And Nefesh is the one that can actually work with your physical goof, with your body, and move your hands and wrap that tefillin around and put it on your head and do all the stuff, right? So for the Neshamah, the Ruach is its residence, and the Nefesh is its hired contractor, right? That's the guy that's actually gonna do stuff, right? I'm gonna build a house, I'm just paying for it. I'm approving the architectural drawings and stuff like this. I'm not the one who's gonna be putting bricks together and frame and roof and plumbing and whatever. That's gonna be Nefesh's job. If I'm in the Neshamah, right, then the Ruach is my architect and my whatever, head of construction project, and he interfaces with the actual guy on the site, and that guy actually does stuff, right? So so he says that what is called kodesh in this pasuk. Kodesh is this very intense, very sophisticated spiritual light that is something that Neshamah is compatible with. Neshamah is sophisticated and elevated enough spiritually that it can deal with this light that comes in a very pure spiritual form. Whereas the hired worker and the resident, right, are not allowed to partake of this kodesh. In other words, there's such a holy, pure light that even Ruach is not compatible with and cannot absorb. Forget about Kal v'chomer, the Nefesh is incapable of that, right? So says that, right, this is what it's talking about, that the resident and the hired worker are not allowed to eat of the kodesh that is given to Kohen. Kohen being the Neshamah, right? There's certain light that Neshamah can take from higher levels, like on my picture, that the lower levels are not compatible with. They're just not spiritually sophisticated enough to interface with it, to absorb that life and properly process it. So it says, further the Torah says, that if the Kohen will acquire a Nefesh, right? So not a guy you're renting a room to, your basement, not the contractor that you hired to, I don't know, build your sunroom. A Kohen can buy somebody, right? Back in the day, right? You could buy someone on a labor market, right? And that person becomes your property, your slave. And I don't mean that word in a negative connotation, right? Let's just use the non-English word eved, right? The person becomes your servant, right? If he is acquired by the Kohen, he is in a completely different status than the other two guys we just discussed, right? So the Kohen, what does it mean that the Kohen, which is, we said, lofty Neshamah, acquires a Nefesh? So he says, first thing he notices, he says that, wait a second, the word Kohen is masculine, and Neshamah is feminine word. Why are we calling, you could ask Ohr HaChaim a question, why are you calling the Neshamah, which is feminine, by the masculine term in Kohen, which is masculine word? So he says what it means is that in this mystical phraseology, when you use a masculine term, that means a level of someone who himself acquired ability to be a giver, right? To project something into the world because he advanced on a high enough level. Again, we're not, praising the man versus the women or something like that. Chas v'shalom. That's not the intent here. The idea is that the masculine is the giver, right, and the feminine is a receiver. And obviously, a giver in this framework is considered to be on a higher level. So he says that if this is a spiritually accomplished person, he has the capability, like a Kohen, he can acquire a Nefesh, meaning that the Neshamah can positively impact the lower levels of the human soul, of your Nefesh, and Kal v'chomer of the Ruach, who are much easier to influence because it's already on a much higher spiritual level, right? Neshamah, when it does its job right, when the person is at the level was already earned the privilege to even have their Neshamah, right? Neshamah can then have very positive effect on the lower levels of his soul, on the Ruach, on Nefesh, right? And it can elevate it up to such a degree that now the Nefesh is allowed, right, to consume the holy things that otherwise he would not be allowed to consume, right? You have the Eved that you bought on the market. Before you bought him, let's say you're a Kohen, he was not allowed to ever partake of the Truma, right? Because he's not a Kohen himself. If that Eved was acquired by the Kohen, and now he's part of his household property, now he has the privilege to eat truma that Kohen gets. All right. So he says that Nefesh and Ruach, as we said, on their own accord, it would be impossible for them to be able to absorb and interface with this super elevated godly light that Neshamah is getting. But Neshamah can elevate the Nefesh and the Ruach to its own level. And when it does, now they are actually able to receive and absorb the light of Hashem on the same level as Neshamah that pulled them up and elevated them to its own level. That's an amazing thing, that the Ruach can elevate the Nefesh to its own level, right? And Neshamah can elevate Ruach and Nefesh to its own level, right? And now they can get something that by themselves they would never be able to do. So then it says, if somebody is born in his home, somebody was born in the house of the Kohen, and it says that they may eat of his food, right? What is that talking about? He says this is talking about something that happened all the way back at the beginning of the time of creation, when, as a result of the sin of Adam HaRishon, souls fell into the clutches of the negative forces of creation. And he says that a righteous person, through their deeds of righteousness, act like a magnet, like a powerful magnet that can pull those souls from the clutches of negativity, yank them out of there, and bring them onto the side of Kedusha. That is the power that a truly righteous and spiritually advanced individual has, right? That they can influence other people to completely change their whole perception of the world, their life, right? They can inspire them to change their life, to do teshuvah, to become observant, or to elevate in their level of observance, or whatever, depending on who interacts with whom. But a righteous person has that magnetic effect that can influence even someone who is on a very low spiritual level, like example he gave. Okay, so now in our pasuk number 12, it says that if Kohen's daughter shall be married to an outsider, meaning non-Kohen, then she's not allowed to eat from the holy things that she was allowed to eat in the house of her father, the Kohen. So it says, this is speaking about a Neshamah that was blemished and it was defiled through its actions, and it loses its privilege to benefit from this holy godly light that it had access to before, right? So what does it mean that a soul is married to an outsider? The Kohanis is married to an outsider, right? It means that a person is absorbed in his, as he says here, in things that are foreign to the Jewish Jewish Weltanschauung, to the Jewish way of life, things that are opposite to Torah, things that are not what Hashem wants you to do. The person is obsessed, I don't know, with the physical world, with the pleasures of this world, with things that Torah forbidden by Torah, with things that Torah says you should stay away from, right? If that happens, right, that has an impact on that soul, and it's no longer compatible with the light of Hashem, that he calls here truma, right? Truma is the holy things that before that soul is potentially capable of absorbing that light. But because it got so obsessed and crazy about things that Torah warns us not to be involved with, and it got all smeared up with them and stuff like this, right? Now it can't have it anymore. It's just not compatible. And also says that why is it happening, right? Because the soul created a certain barrier, right? It took all these foreign things and made them the main part of itself, and that created a barrier between the godly light that Hashem wants to give that soul, and it made it impossible to penetrate through, right? That all that foreign to to Jewish way of life stuff that a person is engulfed in, right? That prevents the light of Hashem of getting through to him, right? So, for example, simple example: a person is obsessed with, I don't know, football, right? And he's constantly thinking about it, and this game and that game and the score and the way this player did this thing and this player did this thing and whatever stuff. He's literally using his mind that Hashem gave him the capability to use that mind to contain the light of Torah in that mind and fill his mind with garbage, right? And it makes it almost, not completely, but almost impossible for him to have something, to be able to concentrate, focus, and absorb and retain good and holy information. It's just simply because his mind is preoccupied obsessively, right, with things that are antithetical to the light that Hashem wants him to have in his mind, right? So that's just a simple example. The next, it says that Cohen's daughter who will become a widow, right? That's another case. Who is Cohen's daughter that will become a widow? What is it talking about? He explains here the pasuk is speaking about what we call the highest level of the soul, the Neshamah of the Neshamah, or the Chaya, which, as we said, itself is never gonna cling to or even allow anything negative to touch it. Instead, what we said happens if there is a danger, it just leaves the human being. It goes back to spiritual world and says, bye-bye, can't be here anymore, right? And he says, it's interesting that the crop that is above, that is used for that in Sephardi tradition called tilsha. I think we call it in Ashkenazi tradition, we call it lisha kitana. Right? Some trap are called a little bit different in Sephardi tradition. It says the reason there is a trap called tilsha over it is because tilsha literally means detached. That word means detached. So it says Cohen's daughter, which in this example is the highest level of the soul that a human being can have, right? Will detach itself from a human being if it feels the danger that negativity can touch it. It will just detach. It will just go away. So, which means that no outsider can have association with it. It can't allow anything unholy to ever touch it. Right? That's what it means that the daughter will be, become a widow. And before that, it says that she married on the outsider, meaning a non-Kohen, somebody who's not compatible with that level. Right? So it says it will just leave the human being. So it says that she will become a widow or a divorcee, or widow and divorcee. So it says that who is this widow? And now, right, she's the daughter of the Kohen, and she's got to go back to father's house, right? It says who is a widow? She's a woman that has no husband that can feed and support her, right? And so what does that mean? It means that very lofty level of human soul, the Chaya, like we said, every level needs the support of the lower levels. It's not able to interface with the world directly, right? So Chaya needed the support of Neshamah that's supposed to surround and protect it from environment that is too coarse, too rough for the Chaya. So it says that's like its husband, right? And it's supposed to take care of it, and it didn't, right? So in other words, it didn't get the possibility to do the mitzvahs and the good deeds that it wanted to do. And that created a dangerous situation for it. And now it had to go away. It says, who's a divorcee, right? For the person who got the privilege to host this very holy level of a human soul, right? And instead of appreciating it and giving it every opportunity to do what it came here to do, the person, chas v'shalom, did something negative, right? So it's like he divorced himself from the highest privilege that Hashem can possibly give you. Like he divorced himself from Hashem, basically. Hashem said, congratulations, you got to level 4, right? I'm giving you the highest possible accomplishments, the highest level of the soul that it can be. But you got to be very careful with it because it's very, very sensitive to even the smallest things in this world that are negative, right? You got to be absolutely 100% pure if you want to contain it and be able to retain it, right? And instead, the person was not careful, right? So it's like almost like he divorced himself from what Hashem gave him. He drove it away, right? And it says, so then it says that, okay, let's say this daughter of the Kohen is a widowed or divorced, right? And she did not have a child, right? If she didn't have a child with this outsider and she came back to her father's house, we say she is allowed to resume eating truma, right? So what does that mean? Because we just said that we're talking about this very high level of the soul of what they call chaya, right? It says, right? So it comes back to the world of souls, to the Father's table. Father is Hashem, right? And it says that now the only food you can get at Hashem's table when you're up there is kodesh. There's no other, nothing else is possible and present there, right? So it says now the chaya will eat this in shame. Why will it eat it in shame? Will it take this light in shame? Because it was supposed to come here and accomplish a certain mission. And instead, like we said, it is a widowed or divorced, and it didn't produce offspring. Producing offspring, meaning that it accomplished something that it came to accomplish, and it didn't, right? So father says, well, I mean, you're my daughter. Of course I'm going to take you back in. I'm not going to leave you on the street, right? And of course you're going to eat from my table. But for the soul, it's very painful because the soul feels like, well, I did not deserve this. I failed my mission. And now I'm back here only because my father is just so nice and kind, and he takes me back because I'm his daughter, and he's going to feed me because I'm his daughter. He's not going to leave me hungry. But I don't deserve this because I didn't fulfill my mission. I failed, right? So that's that's what we call a bread of shame. Conversely, if the mission was accomplished, when the person, let's say, passes away and that soul has to go back up in Shemaim into Olam Neshamot and you know, be at that table, it's a completely different scenario, right? Because now it feels like I did what I was supposed to do. I fulfilled the mitzvahs that I was supposed to fulfill. I did the good deeds that I had opportunity to do. I learned as much as I could have learned, right? So when I come back now to the Father's home and I sit at his table and I bask in his holy, godly light, I don't have to feel shame anymore. I did what I was supposed to do to earn it. Now when I eat at his table, I feel like I earned this meal. I did what he expected of me. Father is not disappointed in me because I did what he wanted me to do. And then it says that, but any outsider may not eat of the kodesh. So what does this mean? He explains, or Ohr HaChaim explains, it's giving us the reason why Hashem does not take similar pity on the Neshamah. Because what we said so far Chaya is very holy, doesn't ever get contaminated. It just leaves, and it can come back to the Father's table and keep eating, albeit in shame if it has to, right? But we didn't say the same thing about the Neshamah. Even though the Neshamah is a very high level, Neshamah doesn't get that privilege. So he says, why? That's what this part of Pasuk explains. Because the reason is, we say that no outsider is ever allowed to touch that very holy light. So if the person allowed any sort of contamination, even the minuscule, the very sophisticated contamination that happens on the level of the Neshamah, it's still a contamination, right? Only Chaya leaves before it's been touched by negativity. The lower levels, even the Neshamah, right, can get contaminated to a degree. When that contamination happens, that means there's certain negativity that is attached to it in a certain way. And Hashem will never allow the negativity to ever, even a little bit, to touch what we call kodesh, to touch this holy, absolutely pure light. Right? So this is why Neshamah doesn't get the privilege that Chaya does, because since it can have this tiny little contamination, we can never allow that negativity to ever touch this light that has to stay absolutely pure and absolutely uncontaminated. However, Chaya, like we said, Chaya leaves the human being before there's any chance of any even minute contamination. So Hashem says, okay, you're still compatible, you're still, sterile enough to walk into the surgery room and, not contaminate the whole environment. You're okay. You didn't accomplish what you were supposed to, but you didn't get smeared up either, right? It's just, you're going to have to go back and have to try it again. You're going to have to do what needs to be done. That's still on you. Nobody is going to relieve you of your duties, but you're okay. You can still sit here at the table and partake with me. So this is the very, I guess, abstract and allegorical explanation that Ohr HaChaim gives to this whole scene with the daughter of the Kohen, and ability or inability or permission, or lack of such, being able to consume holy things, and just to show us a glimpse of the depths of the Torah. Of course, like he said, on a simple level, yes, it means literally eating or not eating truma. It could be a daughter, a husband, a resident, a contractor, whatever, right? But of course, Torah has infinite depths, and considering how infinitely deep this information is, he says, I'm going to show you the tip of the iceberg of what it's talking about, so that whenever you read anything in the Torah, you can appreciate that beyond whatever you think you understand or know about it, there's always infinitely deeper levels of understanding of Hashem's wisdom that he gave us the privilege to study through the Torah.